There is a topic out there that Thinking Critical fans have wanted me to address: DC Compact Comics, whether it be on the YouTube, the live stream for aficionados, on the Patreon. How are DC Compact Comics doing? Are they making an impact? And there is no empirical data out there. There isn't a press release from DC Comics stating, this line has been ultra successful. It's raised sales in our graphic novel market by 5%, which you might think, well, 5% is not a big number. It is if it's only 12 books. That would be an outstanding performance regarding the sales of DC Compact Comics. We don't have the empirical evidence out there stating exactly how DC Compact Comics are performing on the market and what DC really think about the performance so far. But there are 5 pieces of data out there that I looked at, was able to find, that give me a good idea, gauge of how DC Compacts are doing and if they are making an impact. Bottom line up front, the answer is yes. How much of an impact? You might be surprised. I know I was actually very, very surprised. The first thing I want to talk about, DC Comics has done something quite rare in the comics world, made a commercial to sell comics. The graphic novel line features a 5x5 by 8x5 standard book trim for trade paperback novels. That means it's much more compact than a traditional comic or graphic novel. Andy P., Senior Vice President and General Manager of DC back in November, stated, "This 5x5 by 8x5 paper cut is the most widely circulated softcover book size in the US and is popular among graphic novel aficionados in international markets. At $9.99, it's a great price point for retailers to stock these classic titles." Evidence number 1, they made a commercial about it. That makes me think it's actually been successful. Why would they invest in something that was failing unless they just had money to throw around? Which DC Comics doesn't, because they don't do trailers. They never really advertise their products outside of the inside of their books. That is a very good sign. And what Andy P. said there, $9.99, you get the traditional size, for more softcover books, and also basically what everything manga related is distributed in, is really good value, because all of these are essentially 12 issues of a comic book placed into a graphic novel. 12 issues for $9.99 is a fantastic value. If they put it in the traditional graphic novel size, it would be $30. So $9.99 is a great value, and I'm not surprised people are being drawn to this. Now, they are somewhat constricted to this 12-issue format for some reason, at least in the early goings of DC Compact Comics. There are plenty of DC stories out there that are amazing that are not told in 12 issues. Batman Year One is not a 12-issue story. Dark Knight Returns is not a 12-issue story. Another one that I would throw out there that would be bigger would be something like DC The New Frontier, which I'm covering over on the Patreon for the Comics Guilds, reading through the Darwin Cook Classic. It's 6 issues, but the issues are triple sized. They're 60 pages each. So it would be about 50% bigger than the normal page count for the DC Compact Comics. Could you put it out there being a little bit thicker and throw a $13.99 price point on there? I think so, and I think people would enjoy it. So they are a little bit constricted to the page count that they're doing, but it's clear that they are popular and they are actually investing some money in getting the word out, which I think is a great piece of information to let you know that it's actually working, that it is making an impact. We can also look at the sales data, not only at comic book shops, but in the bookstore. And the bookstore is more important than the comic book shop, not because I support bookstores over comic shops. That's the exact opposite of what I believe in. But a vast majority of comic book sales when it comes to graphic novels are happening in bookstores, specifically manga. That's where a lot of the growth has happened. Unfortunately, not in comic shops, but in bookstores. So the bookstore numbers that I'm going to give you are more important. Let's do the comic book shop stuff first and see what kind of impact DC Compact Comics are having right now. We can see from July 2024 numbers from Comic Hub, which is about 140 stores nationwide, reporting their graphic novel sales. 3 DC Compact Comics are making an impact. Coming in at number 6, All-Star Superman, obviously Grant Morrison. Batman Court of Owls from Scott Snyder at number 11. And then The Watchmen at number 15, obviously the Alan Moore classic. Some consider it to be the greatest comic book story of all times. 25% of the line is in the top 20 as of July of 2024. That is great news. That means it's being turned and burned in comic book shops. And I have heard specifically from retailers saying, I almost can't keep them in stock at the comic book shop. Every time I put them back on the shelf, within a day or two, they're gone because people are coming in and they're gobbling them up. Hopefully, most retailers have gone out there got a nice thick stack of DC Compact Comics, specifically All-Star Superman, Watchmen, and Court of Owls, because they didn't do the best job of vetting the line and putting stuff that was going to get people super excited. Certainly, they put some really exciting stuff in there, but they also put Far Sector. If you're a Green Lantern fan, you don't want to read Far Sector. You want to read Green Lantern Rebirth. You want to read Sinestro Corps War. You want to read Blackest Night, or some of the greatest Green Lantern stories of all time. And there are certainly a lot of things out there that I think could have been done better. I understand people like Wonder Woman Earth 1. I personally would have chosen something much different for the launch of Wonder Woman and the story that I wanted to get out there. But they have tried to diversify the line. I kind of understand that. But the stuff that has always sold is the stuff that's selling the best. You can certainly take that away with the numbers that we have. So those are the data points that we have from comic book shops. Now let's talk about bookstores, which, as I mentioned, is more important because that's where the vast majority of graphic novel sales are happening. When looking at the June 2024 numbers for Circana BookScan top 20 superhero graphic novel sales, we see once again 3 DC Compact Comics editions making an impact. Number 2, Watchmen DC Compact Comics. Number 4, Batman Court of Owls Saga. And then down at number 16, All-Star Superman. So there we can see, also in the bookstore chain, those 3 titles specifically are making an impact with people. They're up there in the top 20 selling graphic novels. When it comes to superheroes, and Watchmen is only trailing TMNT The Last Ronin, which is the only American graphic novel that's been able to compete with manga essentially for a year and a half, 2 years now. It's the only book that's always there, and it's been there for a long time because it had staying power that I think is enviable, that everyone should be working for, to find that story with characters people care about, with the continuity people really enjoy, telling a story that they think is meaningful. And you can see with what IDW has done with TMNT The Last Ronin, specifically Kevin Eastman and Tom Waltz and company, that laid that book out and brought it to fruition, that it was very, very successful, and it was actually competing with manga. Are DC Compact Comics competing with manga? Because that's what I think they want to do. And this, I think, is going to surprise a lot of people. We look at the Circana BookScan top 20 adult graphic novel sales from June 2024, which includes superheroes, manga, and author graphic novels. Coming in at number 18, Watchmen DC Compact Comics Edition. Now, it's far under TMNT The Last Ronin, which is up at number 6, the hardcover edition. But we have a DC book on the top 20 adult graphic novel sales, and that is awesome. That hasn't happened for a very, very long time. Watchmen DC Compact Comics Edition is competing with manga, which is something DC and Marvel and the other publishers really haven't been able to do outside of TMNT The Last Ronin. That is awesome news. That is needle moving. That is going out there into the market, realizing there's a deficiency in the product, that the size doesn't work for modern readers, going and addressing that and putting it out there and seeing results. It's competing with Jujutsu Kaisen. It's competing with My Hero Academia. It's competing with Kaiju number 8. It's competing with One Piece and all the major players that have really been blowing up, not only in America, but really in Europe and all over Asia as well, because manga has kind of taken over as the preferred style for comic book reading. Japan is still the largest comic book market in the world, bigger than the United States. And DC has found its way with these DC Compact Comics to actually compete with that. And that is the biggest piece of data that you need to know. Yes, not only are they making a difference, they're making a big difference. They're actually competing with manga, which is something I don't think any of us could have expected even a few years ago, because they were getting pants so hard. That is awesome news. That is proof of concept. And that's why I believe you'll see Marvel come up with their version of Compact Comics and all that kind of stuff. Now, my biggest worry going into all of this stuff was, well, you know what? They're not made for that format. Specifically, the dialogue, the caption bubbles and everything, you're going to have to shrink them down along with the art. Would you even be able to read it? Everyone that I've talked to, and I cannot talk about my own experience because I do not have a DC Compact comic. They don't sell them here in my little town that I live in the Philippines. But everyone that I've spoken to that's read these DC Compact comics say they have an awesome form factor. It's the right size. And yes, you can read the dialogue and the narration and everything perfectly fine on the smaller format. They found the right size. They transitioned it correctly. And it looks like $1 million. And it feels like an enormous value because it's $9.99 for 12 comic book issues. Now, certainly you hope something more current than the Watchmen is able to compete with manga, but right now, The Watchmen has been a perennial seller for decades upon decades. And if you go back to like 12 years ago when DC was still the number one top dog in graphic novel sales in America, Watchmen probably still would have been number one because it's Watchmen. People consider it to be the greatest comic book story of all time. Another piece of evidence, not quite as compelling as actually making it onto the list with manga there with The Watchmen, that I think also speaks volumes about the success of DC Compact Comics, is we're getting another wave of books. DC is adding 6 more titles to the DC Compact Comics line, bridging the gap of origin stories for Batwoman, Static, and Superman, as well as iconic stories of zombified DCU and heroes getting older. In the sales sheet announcing this, DC promises a commitment to multiple waves. So in May, we're getting Kingdom Come by Alex Ross and Mark Waid, also getting Static Season 1 by Vita Ayala and Reginald Hudland, Nicholas Draper Ivey and Dennis Cowan. In June, we're getting Deceased by Tom Taylor and Trevor Hairsine. We're also getting Superman Birthright by Mark Waid and Lionel Francis Yu. Also getting Superman Batman Book 1 from Jeff Loeb, and Batwoman Elegy by Greg Rucka and J.H. Williams III. Not only is there going to be another wave of DC Compact Comics, they're promising more waves to follow that, which definitely lets me know that the first wave is successful. It's made an impact, and it's doing something very positive for DC Comics. I do wish they would do a little bit better job vetting these books. Static Season 1 is not a needle mover. No one's going to care about that one. Certainly Kingdom Come is a book that I think will be the best-selling out of all of these. I do like Deceased, and I think people that haven't read Deceased will like that book. Superman Batman from Jeff Loeb, absolutely. Superman Birthright by Mark Waid, like, I get it, but it's an inferior origin story. If you're going to do something like that, put out Man of Steel from John Byrne. It's so much better, and it's the origin story people actually care about. Superman Birthright is a perfectly average origin story that doesn't really have any real impact. But at least they're not putting out more crap like why did they put out Far Sector? I still don't get it. We need a true Green Lantern book. They need to fill in that gap. They definitely need to go out there and find the right Flash story. And there's certainly plenty of awesome Flash stories, even in modern times, to go out there and pick from. I would love Saga of the Swamp Thing. I don't know why they did American Vampire. I get like Scott Snyder's kind of a big deal. He's coming back. That book was never going to move the needle. Swamp Thing moves the needle by Alan Moore. That's a great book. And certainly they do want to space these things out. You do want to have a headliner on every single wave, like that one book that everyone's going to have to get. But they definitely need to get some more books out there with some awesome heroes. I would love to see Hawkman from Robert Venditti and Brian Hitch. The first 12 issues of that I think are absolutely brilliant. They tell a full, complete story that I think everyone should read. In fact, if you haven't read Hawkman by Robert Venditti, we are going to be doing that one on the Comics Guild after DC The New Frontier from Darwin Cook. And I'm really excited about that one. I think a lot of people are going to like that. I think it would fit right in this format. Unfortunately, it probably wasn't popular enough, but it's good enough. But there you go. DC Compact Comics, are they a hit? By everything that I can see, without DC coming out and saying specifically this is how big of a hit it is a hit. It seems like it's compelling. It's getting people to buy the books, and it's a form factor that they actually like. I think this is the future form factor of graphic novels from Marvel, DC, and all the publishers in America. And you'll have the bigger one for nerds like us, but you'll have the DC Compact comic form factor that you go with manga for normies out there that you can put in Hudson Books and airports and your Barnes & Noble and stuff like that, where it's an impulse buy because it's only $10 and you get a lot of art in there. You get a full, complete story, not a little story, a big story in there. And I do think this is going to be a game changer. We haven't seen other publishers pick up on this, but we've certainly seen it tried in the past. But then, manga hadn't quite taken over. That form factor hadn't really set in with readers as being the preferred form factor. And that's the world that we're living in today. And I think this is just the beginning. And finally, DC have set a trend that I think is going to help comic books out, which I think is awesome. So there's some good news. I think this is great. And I cannot wait to get my hands on it. When I'm traveling back to America, I hope to have, a copy of a couple of these DC Compact Comics to read on the plane and all that kind of stuff. And I know everyone that's talked to me about reading these and having them in hand loves it. They say it's absolutely awesome. So if you haven't checked it out, definitely go check it out. Maybe your favorite stories out there waiting to be discovered. If you enjoy what I'm doing here covering the comic book industry, and the kind of the way that things are going, this is definitely a momentum changer that might be really changing the tide for DC Comics and graphic novels. I do want to invite you to come over to Thinking Critical Patreon. That's where I add lots more perspective to all this kind of stuff, cover all kinds of topics that I wouldn't be able to cover here on YouTube with all of your favorite guests. If you haven't checked out the Patreon, there's a link in the video description.